Hey everyone, it's Sevy. Our first Cryo Catalyst character has arrived, and it's none other than his grace Wriothesley, who likes to take a more hands-on approach to duke out his damage. This man doesn't pull his punches, so to help you maximize them, this guide will cover his talents, constellations, best artifact and weapon builds, team comps, plus important gameplay tips.
Let's get to work.
Wriothesley is a 5-star Cryo Catalyst DPS with a melee playstyle centered around his enhanced attacks and an HP draining mechanic. His freezing fists of fury are a pretty straightforward gameplay experience, but some aspects about his kit should make you consider if he's your cup of tea. Let's go through his talents to see how he works. Wriothesley's normal attacks are a 5-hit combo sequence, with the 4th normal attack dealing 2 hits. As a Cryo Catalyst user, they are inherently infused with Cryo, and their damage gets boosted further from his skill. As for his charged attack, he consumes 50 stamina to deal a stronger uppercut. Note that it's considered as blunt damage, which means it can shatter frozen enemies. Related to Wriothesley's charged attack is his first Ascension passive. When his HP is less than 60%, he gets the Gracious Rebuke buff, which you can identify when a red aura appears on him. This buff enhances his next charged attack in the following ways. It won't consume stamina, which is quite helpful since the 50 stamina cost is quite significant. It gets a 50% damage bonus for higher damage, and it restores 30% of his HP, which will be relevant due to his self-consuming HP mechanics. This enhanced charge attack has a cooldown of 5 seconds though, so it's not something you can just spam unless you get his Constellation. Now, his normal attacks supposedly have the special property where the combo won't reset even if he sprints or uses his skill. While it does work, as you can see, I found in my testing that this can be fairly inconsistent. Half the time, it seems like dashing does end up resetting the combo. Here, I interrupt his combo pressing only the sprint button after his second hit, but it resets straight back to his first hit animation. The same also happens by interrupting with his skill. It's quite a glaring inconsistency, but maybe it's a bug for now. If so, I hope it gets fixed in the future, especially since attack combos are quite significant to his kit. Onto Wriothesley's skill, casting it makes him dash forward while entering the chilling penalty state, which lasts for 10 seconds with a 16-second cooldown. The wolf icon beside him indicates it's still active, though switching to another ally will cancel it immediately. During this state, he gains an interruption resistance bonus, which is fairly decent but isn't strong enough to withstand high stagger boss attacks. If you want very comfortable interruption resistance, you'll either have to combine it with another interruption resistance buff like Xingqiu's Rain Swords or have a teammate provide a shield. But more importantly, his normal attacks gain additional effects and mechanics. First, he gets a separate normal attack damage multiplier to enhance their damage, similar to how Hoyomix's skill works. However, every enhanced normal attack hit causes him to now lose 4.5% max HP, and his normal attacks will only stay enhanced if he's above 50% HP. So to deal more damage, he self-consumes HP, which allows him to trigger certain HP changing related effects, but also introduces considerations for his playstyle and survivability. Most notably, he loses a portion of his damage potential if he's at half health, and combined with him actually taking damage on the field, that's a greater risk of dying. As such, you will need to ensure he can consistently keep his HP up. You'll remember that his charged attack can restore 30% HP, so this is one way to keep his health up. But due to its cooldown and requirement to trigger and how fast he can self-consume his HP, the heal alone won't bring himself back to full HP. Another more comfortable way is to have a healer teammate, which I'll discuss further in the team section. His HP mechanics are something you'll have to manage more, so be ready to address it with the right team and gameplay techniques. Wriothesley's skill state is also the only time he can generate cryo particles, and only if he's also above 50% HP. His enhanced attack hits generate 1 cryo particle with a cooldown of 2.5 seconds, and you can expect 4 particles on average within his skill state. Also related to his HP mechanics is his 4th Ascension passive. If his HP increases or decreases while in his skill state, he gains attack stacks, maxing out at 5 stacks for a total of 30% bonus attack, which will help him deal more damage. Finally, we have his burst, which costs 60 energy and has a 15-second cooldown. It's a straightforward ability that does a 5-hit surge of AoE cryo damage in the frontal area. His burst is also where his Usia-aligned Arca attack comes from, which comes with a noticeable drawback. If ever you want to counter an enemy with an Usia attack, you'll have to contend with both recharging his burst cost and waiting for the cooldown, unlike those whose Arca applications are just tied to cooldowns. When leveling up his talents, prioritize the normal attack levels followed by his skill, with his burst as the lowest priority. Now that we can understand how Wriothesley's different parts work, let's also cover his on-field attack combos. He can have different combos that consider attack speed buffs and whether or not you're triggering his enhanced charged attack. The N5 N4C combo is standard without attack buffs, and there's enough cooldown time between the charged attacks to trigger the enhanced version twice, assuming you're not healing him too much. With attack speed buffs, you can start fitting in an N5 N5C combo instead into his skill state duration, either as the second half of the combo or done entirely twice, depending how high your attack speed buff is. There should still be enough cooldown time to trigger 2 enhanced charge attacks. Alternatively, if he's being healed so much, you can just keep spamming his normal attacks and not worry about doing a charge attack anymore, which is much more straightforward to play. Always remember you don't have to strictly follow these to the letter, as you should adapt to the situation accordingly, and you're highly encouraged to experiment your own combos, especially if you're going to stack way more attack speed. Note as well that getting slowed, like by an enemy applying cryo on you, can cause Wriothesley to fit less hits into his skill duration. As for when to use his burst, you have 2 options. First is using it in the middle of his skill state when you've stacked up his A4 passive and the Marechaussee crit rate bonus if ever. This also allows the burst to take advantage of other external buffs, but since the burst animation takes up around 2 seconds, his skill and other buffs may no longer cover his final punch combo, so that's the trade-off. Another option is to use his burst after your skill state. His Ascension 4 passive's attack buff will still be active, though any other buffs from your teammates or equipment might already have expired depending on their buff durations. As such, you're more able to completely execute your normal and/or charge attack combos at the expense of a weaker burst. In any case, it's entirely fine to just burst every other rotation and not worry much about building energy recharge. Now let's take a look at what Wriothesley's Constellations change or add to his kit. C1 changes Wriothesley's A1 passive to make his Gracious Rebuke buff more spammable. He can now also trigger an enhanced charge attack when his 5th normal attack hits while in his skill state, and its cooldown is reduced from 5 seconds to 2.5 seconds. Additionally, when he does his enhanced charge attack, it now gains a huge 200% damage bonus and can extend his skill state duration to a total of 14 seconds rather than just 10 seconds. This constellation lets him have more field time, and more importantly, you can alter his attack combos into just spamming an N5C. And note that more enhanced charge attacks also means he can heal more frequently, which makes for a more comfortable sustained experience. Overall, this is a great quality of life constellation that simplifies his charge attack combos, makes him easier to play, and gives a pretty good damage increase of about 20% from C0. C2 makes each stack from his A4 give a 40% damage bonus to his burst, so at 5 stacks he gets a huge 200% damage bonus to his burst. That makes it much more rewarding and nuke-worthy to use, and can also incentivize you to try bursting every rotation. C3 increases his normal attack talent by 3, a nice boost for his main damage source. C4 makes Wriothesley's enhanced charge attack now restore 50% max HP, and if Wriothesley gets overhealed, he triggers additional effects depending if he's on or off field. If he's on field, his attack speed will increase by 20% for 4 seconds, which lets him do faster combos to squeeze in more hits. But if he's off field, all of your own party members' attack speed will be increased by 10% for 6 seconds instead. These 2 methods of increasing attack speed cannot stack though. Since his C1 lets him spam charge attacks more often, or if you have an extra healing source in your team, it can be very easy to keep the uptime of this attack speed buff. C5 increases his burst talent by 3, and finally C6 increases the crit rate of his enhanced charge attack by 10% and its crit damage by a whopping 80%. Additionally, it now creates an icicle that deals cryo damage based on 100% of his enhanced charge attack, which is also counted as charge attack damage. This essentially fully kicks his charge attack into overdrive. Wriothesley's kit is already very functional at C0, but if you're looking to spend a handful more primos on him, I would first look at C1 as a good early stopping point thanks to its quality of life and damage upgrades. With his kit, combos, and constellations done, let's move on to discussing how to build Wriothesley, starting with his artifact stats. For the main stats, your standard build will be an attack sense, ice damage goblet, and a crit circlet that gives him a good crit ratio. Just be sure to account for all other sources of crit rate so as not to overcap, like the 4-piece hunter / 4-piece blizzard, cryo resonance, teammate buffs, and so on. And if you're able to stack a lot of external crit bonuses but not as much attack buffs, using an attack circlet is still a viable option, especially if it has significantly better substats. In a reverse melt playstyle, switching to an EM Sands is also an option if you're lacking EM from substats. For substats, you mainly want crit and attack, while EM is also welcome if used in melt teams. Depending on how often you want to burst with him, you can get ER substats as well. If you plan to just burst every other rotation, then you can get away with little to no ER substats on him. Then, with around 130 to 140% ER, Wriothesley can generally burst every rotation when comped with another cryo teammate and Favonius weapon users. But when you use him him in teams where he's the only cryo, it becomes impractical to get higher ER. Again, bursting every other rotation is perfectly fine, so you can instead focus on other stats rather than ER. Then for his artifact sets, he has 2 top choices, followed by still viable 4-piece choices with lower potential. The most recommended is the 4-piece Marechaussee Hunter, which buffs normal attack and charge attack damage, and has a huge stacking crit rate buff. Since he reduces his own HP quickly, he'll easily get the crit rate stacks, and it will be universally effective and a top-rated set in any team he's in. A second and niche set is the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, limited to being viable and best in freeze teams only. If you already have good pieces from before and are planning to primarily use him for freeze, then it's a great choice. However, Spiral Abyss usually includes bosses which can't be frozen, so for a more universally applicable set, the Marechaussee Hunter is best. Behind the 4-piece Hunter are the following sets that give relevant buffs to his playstyle. They have their own caveats and conditional benefits, so I would only advise using these sets if you already have them. Otherwise, it's really not worth investing resin to farm or even strongbox these specifically for Wriothesley when we have his universal best in slot, the 4-piece Hunter. If you don't have 4-piece options, you can temporarily go for 2-piece combos of Hunter, Blizzard Strayer, attack percent, or EM for reverse melt, which allows for more substat flexibility that can make them still competitive with most 4-piece sets. Now when it comes to his recommended weapons, Wriothesley generally likes catalysts that give him attack and crit, and he has a lot of choices from free-to-play to 5-star options. Starting with the free-to-play catalysts, the Fontaine Craftable Flowing Purity and the current free event weapon Ballad of the Boundless Blue are his most highly recommended free-to-play options with close potentials. The Black Cliff Agate is also a general option, but it has a conditional passive that's useless on bosses. If you have it, it's fine, but if not, I don't advise using your Starglider to purchase it. Then for Gacha 4 stars, Wriothesley's top choice is the Wriothesley, as usual with most Catalyst DPS units. In most teams at max refines, the Wriothesley is competitive with non-signature 5-star options, and even just at R1, you can essentially stick with it over any other 4-star weapon. For a Battle Pass option, the Solar Pearl is viable, though not a big difference from craftables, and noticeably worse versus Wriothesley, especially since it's not as synergistic with his kit. Then for his 5-star weapons, his best in slot is a signature Cashflow Supervision, which gives attack percent, normal and charge attack damage, and attack speed, all of which Wriothesley appreciates. The lower crit rate isn't an issue when you'll use him with either 4-piece Hunter or Blizzard set anyway, and it has a higher base attack than most other 5-stars. With his free-to-play weapons as a baseline, Cashflow gives Wriothesley a pretty significant 30 to 35% damage increase. Close behind it is actually Wanderer's signature weapon, Talatala's Remembrance. It has the same base attack as Cashflow, but with crit damage instead of crit rate, and its passive gives a normal attack speed and damage bonuses, also similar to Cashflow's passive, but it lacks the charge attack buff. These two are significantly ahead of the other 5-stars, though other 5-stars are still viable and preferable over most other 4-stars. Finally, let's go over Wriothesley's team comp synergies and considerations. Wriothesley's damage comes from being on-field, so his ideal teammates will be those that can function well from off-field. His team rotations will usually start with setting up teammate abilities and buffs, letting Wriothesley take his on-field time, and then rotating back to teammates for energy and refreshing abilities. Then regarding his survivability at C0, Wriothesley can prefer a dedicated team healer in many cases to help maintain his HP above 50% and keep the enhanced normal attack buff consistently active. The team healer you've chosen may also affect whether or not he will actually be using his enhanced charge attack. For example, if he's paired with Bennett, who heals very fast, or Kokomi, whose jellyfish does big heals, Wriothesley can very rarely fall under 60% HP to get his enhanced charge attack buff. In that case, he can spam normal attacks for a more straightforward gameplay and lower risk of dying. But with healers like Mika or Jean, who start with an initial big heal, then have smaller periodic heals, Wriothesley may still find opportunities to do his enhanced charge attack and still maintain a comfortable enough health range. Either outcomes are fine with minor changes to his attack combo, but not a massive damage difference. On the other hand, if you only run him with a shielder and no other source of healing, that might cause issues with his buff uptime. You'll notice that Wriothesley is fine in the first rotation when you start at full health, but once you do his second rotation, you'll only have around 80% HP to start with, and due to his self HP drain, there will be noticeable downtimes where his normal attacks won't be enhanced since he'll stay at 50% HP for a while. However, if you have C1 where he can spam his self healing more often, you can then try running teams that are less reliant on healers. Anyway, let's now proceed to reviewing his standard team archetypes. In a hypercarry team, Wriothesley will be your biggest damage source with 3 supports buffing him and keeping the team alive. There's a wide range of buff utilities from attack bonuses to niche effects. It's an exhaustive list, so we can't go through all of it here, and of course, it will be subject to what's available to you. A sample full team would look like Wriothesley, Bennett, Shenhe, and Kazuha. Wriothesley gets huge buffs from everyone for his damage output, Bennett provides strong healing, and Kazuha shreds enemies' cryo resistance. Next, a standard cryo-based team is a freeze template, which requires at least 1 hydro unit. Xingqiu and Yelan will synergize extremely well with Wriothesley's normal attack-focused playstyle, especially in single-target situations, and Xingqiu offers great defensive utilities like damage reduction and minor healing, while Yelan gives an increased damage bonus buff for the active character. Or it could be someone like Kokomi, who fulfills both dedicated healing and Hydro AoE application. With the Hydro Archon on the way, it will be interesting to see how she'll synergize with Wriothesley's teams too. Other Hydro units can still work as long as they can consistently apply Hydro, though with varying levels of effectiveness. The remaining slots can include another Cryo or Hydro unit that will provide more damage, application, or support utilities. An Animo unit is also a great pick, so they can shred the enemy's resistance while providing their own support utilities like grouping, healing, or buffing. If you want to go full Cryo, a Mono Cryo team is focused on just dealing loads and loads of Cryo damage. Slot in another Cryo DPS that won't compete with Wriothesley for on-field time for more Cryo damage, or Cryo supports to provide off-field utilities. And if you have Shenhe, she's a great option for the various buffs and resistance shred she can give your Cryo team. Having an Animo VV unit to shred Cryo resistance is highly recommended, as all Cryo units will benefit from it. Kazuha is the best choice, but other Animo units can still do the job, especially if you need Jean or Sayu to fill in the healer role. Another template for Wriothesley is Reverse Melt. For this, your Cryo units will be triggering Melt, so it needs consistent pyro application in enemies. There are various ways to have consistent pyro application. First is the classic pyro core of Bennett Xiangling, and Xiangling's Pyro NATO will deal a lot of AoE damage and application thanks to having no ICD. Another method is the Bennett Jean Sunfire combo, wherein Jean's burst consistently swirls pyro applied on the active character through Bennett's burst, consequently applying pyro to enemies around you, though it'll heavily confine you to staying within their burst circles. Burn Melt is also an option, which uses the burning reaction to maintain a pyro aura on your target. Bennett and Nahida are an ideal combo here for a combination of attack and EM buffs, plus Nahida's self-refreshing Dendro application. But by themselves, they won't be able to reliably refresh the burning aura, so you'll need to use an off-field pyro applicator or another Animo unit that can infuse their abilities with pyro to provide pyro application over time, like Kazuha or Sucrose, to help ensure the burning aura stays active. For more Dendro-focused teams, Wriothesley functions well as a driver for Hyperbloom or Burgeon comps. Inserting Cryo into those reactions can provide crowd control and potentially assist in Dendro core generation thanks to the Cryo Aura's mechanics. For Hyperbloom, take a Dendro and Hydro unit combo that provide reliable off-field application to generate Dendro cores, then an Electro unit that will consistently trigger Hyperblooms. Cookie is a highly recommended choice in the Electro slot since she synergizes with Wriothesley's melee gameplay while also providing healing over time. If you use Electro units without healing, then you'll need to supplement healing from either your Dendro or Hydro unit. On the other hand, there's Burgeon for AoE Dendro damage. However, Burgeon explosions also deal self-damage, which is more dangerous when Wriothesley already consumes his own HP. Since none of our best Burgeon triggers double as healers, and Xingqiu isn't a dedicated healer either, we're somewhat forced to use a healer like Yao Yao or Baizhu until other options from any of the relevant elements come out. With more Fontaine units on the way and the Archon releasing in the next patch, perhaps we'll see more synergies appear to expand Wriothesley's team options. And that's it for this guide. Overall, Wriothesley's kit resembles Wanderer's as a skill state, attack combo, burst if ready, rinse and repeat kind of playstyle with HP dynamics thrown in. His animations are fluid enough but can require awareness and practice if you're trying to optimize his attack combos and manage his HP. Still, if you're up to the task and enjoy this type of playstyle, then perhaps he'll be a fun new addition to your DPS roster. Also, he's very, very cool. But let me know what you think about Wriothesley, whether you've tried him out already or pulled him on your account. Feel free to comment down below. If this video helped you out, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!
Why do you look even more pleased about this than me?